Can you guys hear me in the back? Apparently I can't put my arm across here. Okay. How you guys all doing? If you want to learn about marine electronics, you're in the right spot, because that's what we're going to talk about for the next hour. I'm also going to tell you that I'm going to pack a lot of information in. So if I'm going too fast, you're going to write something down or take a picture. I got a booth and you can ask me questions afterwards. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to cover all three brands and why one brand might work better for your specific types of fishing over another. So my name is Dave Janiszewski. I'm the founder and owner of Ripplip and Ripplip University. Ripplip makes marine electronics accessories, cases, covers, sunshades, cleaner, backpack. And Ripplip University is an app that we developed that you can download on your phone or tablet that will walk you through all the settings on your electronics, including everything I'm going to talk about here. So basically there's three major brands that we're working with today: Lowrance, Hummingbird, and Garmin. And these would be the major trolling motors, right? So you got the Minn Kota, you got Garmin's Force, you got Lowrance's Ghost, and the Motor Guide. And all of these brands of electronics integrate with various brands of head units. All the major brands do 2D, side scan, down scan. They all do live. Realistically, Hummingbird's the only one that does 360, although Lowrance has a solution, it's not usable. And really what it comes down to is brand loyalty, a lot of it. So it's Ford, Chevy, Dodge. You've seen those guys in the Ford truck with the sticker with the piston on the Chevy logo and the Ford truck, and vice versa. It's a lot of that. You'll hear people are very, I'm Garmin and that's all I'm going to get, or I'm Lowrance and that's all I'm going to get, or I'm Hummingbird and that's all I'm going to get. And the generalization is they all make really good units. So you choose the electronics that matches your fishing style. So do you fish primarily from the console? So are you someone who sits at the console and drives around, looks at bait, structure, and fish, marks a waypoint, and then come back and fish that structure? Or are you a bank beater? Are you someone that's going down a bank, you're following down a shoreline, you're following down a contour line, and you want me to switch?
You're breaking up, there's interference in the building.
You want me to turn these off? Okay. Is that better? Sorry. Do I need to go over anything else? All right. So bank beaters, right? So you're going down the shoreline. You're primarily focusing on a shoreline, a structure, a sunken island, or any type of shoreline. I think super important in marine electronics these days you can't hear me, is trolling motor integration. Right, so you can now link your trolling motor, you've been for years, with your head unit. So you can control the trolling motor with the head unit and tell it what to do. I would say, from a technology standpoint, I would contend that spot lock made a bigger difference on catching more fish than live sonar does. I mean, you used to have to drift through all that stuff. Now you can spot lock, sit on top of those fish. You can certainly use live to find them, but if you didn't have spot lock, you'd be drifting off that school or dropping an anchor. So one thing to consider on trolling motors is if you're a person that fishes primarily from the console and you're using your trolling motor as a steering mechanism of the boat, if the head unit doesn't turn, you have a hard time figuring out what direction your trolling motor is going. So as an example, in the Minn Kota, the whole head turns. In the Lowrance, there's just a little arrow on the top and the unit doesn't turn, so sometimes you don't know what direction your trolling motor is if you're sitting at the console. So I'm going to go through all three brands. Who are my Hummingbird people? Lowrance, Garmin. Both, more than one brand. All of them. So Hummingbird has three model lines: the Apex, the Solix, and the Helix. Kind of good, better, best, starting with the Helix. The Helix is their non-touchscreen model. All of them do mega imaging, 2D, side scan, down scan. They have the only usable 360, and they have mega live. The networking capabilities of those units, if they have an Ethernet port, you can connect them together and share information across that network. The apex, the solix, and the helixes that have an N all are networkable. All of the apexes and all of the solixes are networkable. Ethernet port in our network. When you're connecting solix apexes together, whatever generation, they can share transducers, share waypoints, they can share mapping cards. The big difference between those and the helixes is networkable. They're going to share transducers, they're going to share and sync waypoints, but they do not share map chips. So if you have helixes, you have to buy a map chip in every unit if you want that link master or whatever chip that you're using in those units. So that's the drawback on the helix system. You don't have to read this whole thing. Basically what it's saying is helix and solix can communicate on the same network, but they cannot share transducers. So, and putting a solix and a helix together doesn't mean that the helix can share the solix's map card. So they can exist together, but not all of the features are going to communicate. The legacy units, the ones that end in a 99 or a 98, does anybody still have any of those? 1198 is a great unit. 1199, great unit. Big screen. You can still network them together. They can be added, but they'll only share waypoints with the helix, and they're not compatible with the new VX chips for Lake Master. So, NEMA ports. So, the solixes, the apexes, the Helix Gen 4, and the Gen 3 2 and 1s with the NEMA shares sensor data. So if you put a connection in your motor and you want that data to translate onto your graph, that's done over a NEMA network. So you would actually have both Ethernet and NEMA at the same time to share engine data and share mapping and charts and waypoints and transducers. The key in Hummingbird, however, is NEMA will not share waypoints. So NEMA will not do that for you on a Hummingbird. Let's talk about with casting rings, but they go witty flags and waypoint targeting. What's really unique about Hummingbird is if you turn these on, so my little laser doesn't work, so I got a point. Waypoint targeting, when you turn it on, as you drive your boat, that's your boat, it lights up the 10 closest waypoints to you and tells you how far away you are from them. If you notice on proximity flags, it's telling me the number of feet I am from that waypoint. Why is that important to you? Well, let's look at this middle one, casting rings. I can set that to whatever I want. Right now I've got it set to 30 feet. Let's say you set it to 50, and that's a waypoint that you've identified as a hump with a pile of smallmouth on it. And you don't want to spook them, you want to cast at them. So as you're approaching it, you can make sure that your boat stays outside of that castable distance and you're not going to run over that school of fish and spook them. They do a really great job at that technology. Dynamic contrast. Hummingbird guys, do you turn this on? You know this feature? Upgraded your software. It came out, now it's about 2 years ago. It's especially helpful if you're a river fisherman or you're in dirty water or stuff that's got a lot of clutter in the water column. And if you look at the differences, what it does is it removes the clutter on the middle of the water column when you turn it on. And it does really good target separation on the bottom. So if you looked at that fish on that side as opposed to that fish on that side, it's way more bottom definition. And that's available on your 2D, your SI, your DI, your 360. Turn on dynamic contrast. You're going to see a big difference on it. Keep your software up to date. If you didn't keep your software up to date, you wouldn't have that feature. A lot of debate online about don't do the software update. It's going to screw up your unit forever. And I did it 3 times and I had to send it back in. Here's the key. Always, never ever not, always install from a chip. They've got apps, they've got Wi-Fi, you can do it that way. Don't ever do that. Get an SD chip, put it in your computer, download the software update from the website, and put that chip in your graph. Some of these updates are 40, 50, 60, 200 megs worth of data. You try to do that over Wi-Fi or over an app and there's a glitch in the download, you're going to screw up that software update. Download from a chip. From a chip. Who's got a Hummingbird with an iLink trolling motor on it? Where the trolling motor is integrated with the Hummingbird? Nobody? Single best feature you can get on a Hummingbird, in my opinion. So an iLink trolling motor, a Minn Kota trolling motor, means you're going to be able to connect it directly to the graph, right? Follow a Contour is a Lake Master and a Hummingbird copyrighted or patented technology where I can tell it, I want to follow the 12-foot contour line on the map, and your trolling motor will follow the 12-foot contour line on the map. But even more important than that, there's a feature called contour offset. Super powerful feature. So let's say this is the 12-foot contour line. How many of you guys are trollers? You troll crawler harnesses or crankbaits? Okay, so let's say you're trolling crawler harnesses along a weed line and you're following this 12-foot contour line. But every so once in a while you're getting hooked up with weeds and you got to pull it in and tears off your... If I tell contour offset, go plus 5 feet, it's not distance, it's width. So it's going to move over here. It's going to move the boat 5 feet from the 12-foot contour line, but still follow it, and you're going to get less weeds on your trolling harness. Let's say you're trolling flicker shads on a rock pile, rock ridge, and you're following that same 12-foot contour line, and you want that flicker shad to be bouncing off the rocks more. Make your contour offset -5. So now it's still going to follow the 12-foot contour, not 5 feet in depth, 5 feet in width of the boat. Let's say that you wanted to follow the shoreline without ever touching your trolling motor. You said follow a contour on the 1-foot map line, and you set your contour offset at +100. It's going to be 100 feet from the shore, all the way down the shore. You'll never have to touch your trolling motor. Those features are only available in a combination of a Minn Kota and a Hummingbird. Garmin people? I know I had a couple Garmins. So Garmin system, GPS map, Echo Map, Striker. So good, better, best. They integrate with their own force trolling motor. Traditional Clearview is their downscan, side view, and live scope. All those same technologies. No 360 here. Networking units, all the GPS map can network, and all of the Echo Maps that are 7 or larger in the Ultras and the UHDs. Those are the newest models. Have Ethernet ports. So share and waypoints, you can share mapping cards, you can share transducers. But if you have a non-UHD graph on here, it can't share a UHD transducer. So the older Echo Maps. GPS map, here's the key on Garmin. GPS map only networks with GPS map, and Echo Map only maps with Echo Map. You cannot have them both on the network. So we talked about Hummingbird. You could have Helix and Solix. You can connect them on the network. They'll play together. They'll show waypoints, but they won't share transducers. You cannot network an Echo Map and a GPS map together. The big issue I see people run into is they buy the Echo Maps to start, and then they go to add live scope, and they want to upgrade to the higher resolution of a GPS map, so they throw it on their network assuming it's going to connect, or they buy it for ice fishing assuming they're going to connect it, and then they're upset when they figure out that they can't network it together. So the key on the Garmin is Echo Map with Echo Map, GPS with GPS map, they do not talk together. Striker has no networking capability. This is an interesting one for me. In the newest models of Garmin, the UHD2 and the Ultra 2, they added Wi-Fi networking, which Lowrance got rid of 2 years ago. And the reason Lowrance got rid of it 2 years ago, in my opinion, is because you can only share 2D data with it. So if you bought the Ultra 2s and you're thinking this is going to be awesome, I'm going to connect it via Wi-Fi and I'm going to network it with my GT54 transducer for side scan, down scan, and 2D, it will not share side scan and it will not share down scan. So it's nice, it's wireless, there's no cables, you can share and sync waypoints, you can share mapping cards, but you can only share the 2D signal off that transducer. Garmin units also have NEMA. We talked about NEMA before. That's where you can share engine data. The big difference in Garmin is you can share waypoints over NEMA on a Garmin. As long as both units are on, when you make a waypoint, it'll show up on the other unit. It will not sync them, but it will share them. So in other words, the syncing would be if I didn't have that unit on and I made waypoints at the console, if I turned the bow on, those waypoints would automatically show up. That's what happens over Ethernet. Over NEMA, both units have to be on. But it's an inexpensive way to connect them together and share waypoints if that's your only goal. The Striker model has no networking capability. So let's talk about a couple features on Garmin that make it unique. Anybody use amplitude scope on their graphs? It's available on all 3 brands. Ever heard of it? Anybody use a vertical flasher or a flasher for ice fishing? You familiar with how those work? This is called amplitude scope. It's a live return of the 2D signal. So it looks like a flasher if you're ice fishing, but it's vertical. And it's highlighting, these fish. So just like when you're ice fishing, you can see the jig through, you can see it on amplitude scope. The interesting thing about Garmin is down here they tell you the width of the cone. I think that's something that guys forget, how not so wide the cone angle is. So I need 2 hands to do this, so I'm going to use 2 fingers. So it's a 20 degree cone on a 200 megahertz facing down. It's about 1/3 the depth of the water. So if I'm in 10 feet of water and I got the trolling motor transducer down, I only see about 3 feet wide. It's narrower than your boat. So you got to think about, I think this is a really nice reminder to tell you how wide the cone is and what you're actually looking at. Really cool feature on Garmin's is a feature called Magnify. Everyone's got Zoom. Most of the time it does a split screen, right? When you set it up on Zoom, it puts 2D on one side and the zoomed in image on the other, and you have to hit a couple buttons to get there. On Magnify, on Garmin, you can turn it on and it's always on. When you want it, you simply pinch it open, it makes this box, and I can move this box anywhere on the screen and magnify that section. So here we're trolling through a school. I can move that right exactly where the school is, and as I'm going through there, those fish are going to get magnified as it comes through the screen. Over here on side scan, anybody fish Eagle Lake in Ontario for fun? Okay, this is off Eagle Lake. It's a narrows area with a really sheer rock cliff. It's about 40 feet deep, about 1 boat length from the cliff. And the walleyes hang right on the cliff. So you just put your Magnify right on the right side of the side scan as you're going through, and it helps pick up those fish that are really tight to it. Just a cool feature that the other ones don't have. Just a battery saver on Garmin. The color mode defaults to auto. So as you're going, it'll automatically change from day to night. You know how you can put your graph in night mode? If you force it into day mode, you can drop your backlight display down to probably about more like 70% and save a lot of battery life on your Garmin. So if you're using your Garmin's for ice fishing or that kind of stuff, go in there and make that adjustment. It'll save you on battery life. Lowrance. So it integrates with their own trolling motor, the Ghost, and it also integrates with the motor guide. So the XI5, XI3, and the Tour series all have link capability into Lowrance. Their 3 models are the Elite, the Hook, and the HDS, so good, better, best. And they have 2D side scan, down scan. Their live is called Active Target. They promote that they have 360, but honestly, it's not usable. They use the trolling motor head to make it work. So if you put as soon as you step on the trolling motor, the 360 goes away. Networking capabilities. All of the HDS line, all the way back to the original Gen 1 from 20 years ago, have Ethernet ports and are networkable. And the Elite Series FS has an Ethernet port, which we'll come back to because it makes the Wi-Fi and Garmin interesting. So you can share transducers, you can share and sync waypoints, you can share mapping cards. The Elite TI2, which was the precursor to the Elite FS, had the Wi-Fi, had the same issues. You could only share 2D, so they discontinued the model and came out with the FS and put an Ethernet port in it so that you could fully network it. So you can match the Elite FS and all the HDSs on one Ethernet network and share all of that information. NEMA on the Lowrance as well. And again, you can share waypoints over NEMA on Lowrance, but only if both units are on. And by the way, in Wi-Fi, you can only connect 2. Same in Garmin, you can only connect 2. So if you have an Elite TI2 from Lowrance, you can connect it Wi-Fi, but again, you're only going to get 2D shared. Lowrance guys, do you have any older than Gen 3 models? Here's the issue with Lowrance. So if you have older than a Gen 3, if you have a Gen 2 or a Gen 1, and you say, oh, I'm going to get a newer unit, I'm going to stick it on my network. There's a feature inside of it called multi-sourcing, which allows you to play 2 different transducers at the same time on those newer units. If you put it on a network with a pre-Gen 3 network, it forces the newer unit into what's called legacy mode, and you will not get all the features and functions out of the newer unit if you have earlier than a Gen 3 on your boat. So you want to be cognizant of that stuff. The hook has no networking capability. Some things you want to think about for Lowrance. I think this is very odd. WAS improves your satellite recognition. So you get a tighter satellite, a better signal, so you have a more accurate signal. It's defaulted to off on Lowrance. Turn it on. You want a better GPS signal. Pages, settings, system, satellites, configure, just hit on. This, I think, is the biggest differentiator for Lowrance, and I don't know what they call it. I've called this feature trackback. What does that mean? If you're a council fisherman and you're driving around finding bait structure and fish, and you see a spot that's pretty good, you saw some bait, it was a nice, but you didn't mark it, and then a mile or so later you think, shoot, I should have dropped a waypoint on that. Lowrance can go backwards over a mile in screens. You could find that spot, put your finger on it, hit waypoint, clear cursor, and then drive to it. The Hummingbirds and the Garmins will go back somewhere between 1 and 3 screen widths. Lowrance is going back somewhere around 11 screen widths. So if you're doing the standard 3 miles an hour, you'll be able to go back more than a mile and remark that stuff. So if you're a council fisherman, that's a big feature that you might want to consider. Only available on Lowrance. This is a little controversial, but we'll get into more controversial stuff when we get into live sonar. Fish reveal is only available on Lowrance, and what it is, so you know on downscan the fish look like little white specks or little pieces of rice, and on 2D you get a hook. What Lowrance did is they overlaid the 2D image on the downscan image, so you get both the hook and a dot. So it's just a way to confirm that what you're seeing is actually fish. So it's pretty small, but is that a fish sitting on top of a brush pile, or is that 3 fish? Well, if I turn on fish reveal, I can see it's a brush pile with a fish sitting on top of it. So it's just a feature that you can turn on and use. The cool thing about it is that you have 2 different color palettes. You can change the hook color palette to synchronize with the downscan palette and really dial it in on the fish reveal. I'm I like that feature a lot. I'm going to skip that page because they didn't come out with it yet. Here's the key. No amount of setting changes, no amount of adjustments, no amount of networking is going to give you the images you want unless you have clean power to your graphs. Home run from the battery to the graph, at least 10 gauge wire, and a properly leveled transducer. And you cannot level the transducer without getting on the water and getting a reading off your boat. So if you got your boat rigged by a professional and they put on your transducer and leveled it, they couldn't have leveled it correctly unless they put it in the water first. So what you need to do is download a level app onto your phone. You can use a regular bubble level if it's digital, but you want the digital. You want a number, okay? You want it to come up with a number. So there's 100 free level apps on your phone. That's on my boat. So you put your boat in gear, you look at your graph, you find a calm bay, and you start driving around at 3 to 5 miles an hour, the speed that you would normally go when you search for bait, pressure, and fish. It's going to give you a reading. My reading is 3.3. So when my boat's on the water and I'm driving around, my level number is 3.3. Now you put your boat back on the trailer, you find a flat parking lot or your garage, and you have somebody hold that cell phone on the gunnel in the same spot where you had it before, and you crank up the todder wheel until that gets to 3.3. And you will be shocked at how much you have to lift the bow of your boat. Mine has to go on a 4x4 block and it's cranked all the way up. Once it gets to 3.3, then you go to the back of your boat and level the transducer on the bubble. Now someone's going to ask me, well, what if there's 4 guys in the boat? What if your live well's full of water? What if I got... This is a great starting point. It's going to improve the images on your graph, I guarantee it. There's about 3 that I know of. If you go to the Ripple Up YouTube channel, there's a how to level your transducer there, and I did it in 3 minutes. So it'll go through the whole thing that I just talked about and help you level the transducer. Let's talk live sonar. Lowrance's is called Active Target. They have an 18-degree cone with 135 degrees. So 18 degrees this way, 135 degrees this way. Okay, I got some images that'll help get you that better. Garmin 20 by 135, theirs is called Live Scope. Hummingbird called Mega Live, 20 degrees by 120. So a little bit different sweep this way, the same 20 degrees. Live sonar, I'm sure people call it forward facing. I don't understand why we call it that. It's live sonar. And it can be forward, down, and landscape mode. But anyway, that's the vernaculars. But I'm going to continue to call it live sonar. You can drive around. The issue becomes, unless you're staring at your graph, when the fish swims through it, you're not going to see it. There's no history. It's great technology, super fun. You know, video game fishing, all that stuff, fantastic. But there's some things with it you got to know it. Sometimes it's frustrating. If you're ice fishing and you see the fish for an hour trying to catch them, I would have moved. So there's no need to wait for the return, right? It's all live. So you're seeing it in real time. However, there's a lot of stuff you got to do with these graphs. First of all, they're always coming out with new technology. Anybody use Mega Live? They came out with a software update on Thursday. Garmin just came out with the LBS 34. Now it's 2 years ago. They're extra range. Lowrance came out with the Active Target 2. They're constantly adding new technology and new software. You could probably make the case that Garmin has the best live technology, but I would also make the case it's the hardest to get dialed in. Out of the box, I think Lowrance has got the easiest one to use. Big differentiator between the 3. Garmin and Lowrance use an external box that has to be in your boat or on in your kit if you're ice fishing. And all of the software changes happen in that little box. Hummingbird's software is located in the head of the transducer. So when you see a Mega Live transducer, it's a little bigger and it's square. It's because the software is in the transducer. You're going to find with live technology that you're going to be messing around with your settings more often. You're going to be changing depths. You might be changing palettes. You might be changing sensitivity, adjusting it to how the waves are going. So there's more fiddling around, if you will, with the live sonar, regardless of which one you have, than 2D or side scan or down scan. The nice thing is you can see the suspended fish, you can see them in the water column, you can see how they're reacting to your bait. Great technology, but you got to play around with it a little bit more. The other thing you have to do is, there's 3 modes, right? There's down, there's forward, and there's either landscape or perspective, whatever they call it. You have to physically change the direction of the transducer and make the change on your head unit to get those done. So there's more fiddling around. If you wanted to change this from down to forward, you can't just go on your graph and say mode forward. You have to change the angle of the transducer. So can you kind of see the difference? This is facing straight down, and this one's faced at an angle out. That's forward mode. So when you're playing with forward mode, it can get a little tricky. So that's 1 click too far down. That's 1 click too far up. So again, in forward mode, you got to play with it. Mine personally, I got it in the forward mode where I liked it. I took a silver Sharpie and I drew a line right where I liked it because it's not on any of the clicks. Both my Garmin and my Lowrance are not on the click that they give you. I'm a little bit off of those. So you got to play around with it and meet what you need, right? If I can put my forward transducer up a little higher so I can see a musky lure splash and then reel it. But maybe I want it a little bit lower, so 1 more click down. You got to play around with it. So landscape mode gets a whole different look. So I really want to do this. So 130 degrees this way, 20 degrees this way, as opposed to forward, which is 20 degrees this way, 135 this way. You get what I'm saying? I would recommend in 99% of the cases you put the live transducer on a pole as opposed to putting it on your trolling motor. Now some guys put it on their trolling motor and they're fine with it and they like it, but if you want to put your trolling motor in spot lock, it's doing this, and you want to look over there, you can't do it. So my suggestion was you put it on an external pole and mount it on the port or starboard side of your boat and use it that way. We're going to talk about coverages and angles. We're going to do some math formulas. Everybody ready for math? So 20 degrees this way, 135, we're going to talk forward. In a 20-degree cone, we talked about that, it's about 1/3 the depth. That's the width that I'm getting. Okay? Following me there? So if I'm in 20 feet of water, that cone is 7.5 feet wide. Follow me there? There's the formula, if anyone wants to take a picture of that, the radius of a cone. No? Okay, the biggest complaint I get from guys with live sonar is I can't see my lure. Why can't I see my lure? And I say it's because of math. How did you do with the isosceles triangle and right angles? 5 feet away from the boat, I get 1.8 feet of width on a 20-degree cone. So if I'm standing at the bow of my boat, and this is where my live sonar is, and I got a rod with 7 feet long, and I got a jig on it, it's approximately 5 feet from my boat. To see the jig, I have a 1.8 foot wide range right down there to see it. It's not in the cone, that's why you can't see your bait. If I make a cast out to the end of this to that kayak, and let's call that 50 feet, at 40 feet, I got a 14 feet wide. So I can fit that within 14 feet, but what happens is I reel it back to the boat. it gets narrower and narrower until I'm right here and I'm at 1.8 feet. So if you can't see the lure on your forward scan, the lure is not inside the cone. And it's not that wide the closer you get to the boat. I mean, 10 feet out, it's only 3.5 feet. So if I see a fish where you're standing and I'm gonna flip it out there, if I hit your buddy, it's not in the cone. You gotta think about that as you're fishing it. So a little bit more math. Remember, we got a 135-degree angle this way, right? So if I draw a line straight down from the middle and I make a 90-degree angle, I get a right triangle. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Okay, this is behind me. This is in front of me. So if I want to fish these fish right here, not only are they behind me, but they're under my boat. Remember the cone right here, I'm down 20 feet. I got 10 feet of width. I got a 101-inch beam on my boat. They're basically under my boat. You got to think about that when you're using this kind of technology. Number one tip I can give you on live sonar. Make your depth 1 or 2 clicks deeper than you're fishing. So fish typically show up as a vertical, like not grain of rice, but they're vertically swimming around. That's how you see them typically. If I'm in 15 feet of water and I set my depth to 20 or 30, it's going to push the screen up. It's going to push it up. It's going to compress that fish. It's going to make it look more like a fish. So when I'm fishing forward mode, I leave my graph menu open on the depth and I'm constantly moving it. 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, 20 feet. Because I want to compress that image and make those images look more like fish. You can get unbelievable images. I'm sure you've looked on YouTube and looked at people's graphs. I've had all the brands in here. I've seen amazing images. I tried to get a video of one last summer. I was fishing for muskies and there was a big school of something. I couldn't tell what it was. Another good tip, carry a little AquaView camera in your boat. If you can't figure out what it is, drop the camera down. So I dropped the camera down. It was a school of perch, about 3 to 5 inch perch. And a muskie came right into the cone. I mean, perfect cone angle. I could see the dorsal fin, I could see the tail, I could see it oscillate its body, and it swam underneath the school and then turned around and went through it, and the whole school separated. And I'm frantically pushing the record button, and I got no chip in my thing, so I couldn't record it. So I found a chip, and I said 45 more minutes, I'm like, come back to the cone, come back to the cone. He came back once for like 2 seconds, but it's amazing technology. But just remember, when you're fishing in forward mode, 1 to 2 clicks deeper than you are, it'll make your images look more like fish and easier to distinguish. So here's sort of the summary. Lowrance, Garmin, and Hummingbird all make fantastic models. They all do 2D, side scan, down scan, live. You're going to get people that are brand loyal that are going to tell you, oh, I'm only going to be a Garmin guy, or I'm only going to be a Hummingbird, and you can have both. A lot of people use both. And they're convinced that I have to get, I've got Hummingbirds, but they don't make good live, so I have to get a Garmin and not use it networked and whatever they're doing. And that's fine, you can do that. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you've got another brand and you want to go live and you're convinced that I have to go one way or the other, your brand does do it. And it does it really well. It's about how you dial it in. Images, you need to make sure that you're transducing properly. And it's about the technique, the way that you fish. So we talked about, if you thought follow a contour was an amazing technology and I have to, you're getting Hummingbird and Minn Kota. If you thought track back is what I 100% need and I'm going to counsel, then you're Lowrance and your Ghost and your Motor Guide. If Garmin is your thing, your Force and Garmin. They're all going to do good stuff for you. Questions? Sort of. You have an EchoMap 93 SV?
Yes.
Okay.
Set it, and I reset it, and I reset it, and it keeps losing.
It keeps closing?
It just keeps, it'll run, I'll calibrate it.
Okay.
It'll be successful. And I fish sometimes for days.
Okay.
It sees that. Like if I got it in forward mode, and I go shallow and change the perspective, it seems to make it just
Yeah, that's pretty specific. Maybe we can talk at my booth about. I have a 93 SV in the booth that we can play around with and look at that with. Everything that I talked about is in our app. People at the university. It's available on the App Store and Apple and Google. It's $10 a year. It covers Lowrance, Garmin, and Hummingbird. Anybody else? Questions? My booth's in 318. If you have questions after here, you can come there. I'm happy to answer any of them. Thank you so much for coming.